Welcome to today's live. So welcome, these are free. And if you're new to the group, we had a lot of new members this past week. If you're new to the group or new to me, I just want to introduce myself quickly, like I always do. My name is Dr. Anna Redmond. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. I'm a chronic pain educator, a chronic pain specialist. I've worked in multiple settings, different kinds of settings, on different types of chronic pain teams, as well as in private practice. I have a specialty in chronic pain management, as well as the impact of stress on our bodies, and a board certification in biofeedback. So I share all of that just because I know the space is full of so many people with so much knowledge about pain and people with personal experiences of pain, but that is what qualifies me to be able to provide education on pain, and hopefully for you to trust that what you receive here is backed by science. I also have an experience with chronic pain myself, which I talk about in, I think, my very first live. I talk about my pain journey and my trifecta, which is my proven system for approaching pain. So you can check that out too. The replays are always available in the guide section, so you never have to miss out on any of the live trainings if you can't make it at the time that we are doing it. So let me make sure hi, thanks for saying hello in the chat. I was just making sure I had everything set up so I could see the chat. And so today we are talking about the power of the pain alarm system, and sort of, I want you to leave today with a basic understanding of what the pain alarm system is in the context of chronic pain. If you see me kind of looking a bit to the side or looking down, I'm just tracking with my notes. I prepare very much for these because I always want to give you as much value I can in this brief amount of time. So let's start by kind of talking about what the pain alarm system is, the role that it plays in the human body, and kind of talking a little bit about its function as a protective mechanism, and sort of the key components involved in the alarm system. And so if you're here and you're listening and you're in my group coaching program, some of this will be review for you. And of course, I go into much more detail there. But I also believe that this education, part of what I'll talk about today, is really a piece that every woman with chronic pain deserves to know and is not typically talked about in conventional pain management treatment appointments. So I always like to make sure that I'm talking about it in my world a little bit. All right, I'm going to take a sip of my coffee and then we'll dive in. Now, you've heard me talk about the difference between chronic pain and acute pain before, but just as a review, chronic or acute pain is pain that lasts for 3 months or less. Usually there's an identified cause or damage or some sort of injury. We usually know why there's pain. Traditional healing methods often work, like rest, taking care of yourself, going to the doctor, getting your broken arm casted. These work really great for acute pain. We heal and we get better generally within that an expected period of time. Now, if pain persists beyond that expected period of time or beyond 6 months, we might know what started that experience of chronic pain, and we might not. Sometimes pain can start from an unidentified stimulus. Basically, it could come up because of a lot of reasons. So it could start in childhood due to difficult circumstances. It could start during adulthood during a time of severe stress. It could start following an injury or an accident and just never go away. Or maybe you had surgery for something and your pain still persisted. So there are a lot of reasons why pain can occur in the first place and why it can persist, and none of them are any less real than the others. So I always make sure to say that. And when we think about the other thing that distinguishes chronic pain often is that the nervous system has gotten really involved over time. Our brain responds a lot to repetition and it starts to learn, and then it decides it needs to protect. That's its job. And it starts to get a little bit more involved as time goes on. And that is the thing that distinguishes it from acute pain. where the brain and the nervous system are becoming more and more protective, sometimes overprotective. And that's part of the reason that pain continues. And that is not something that you can pick up on an X-ray or an MRI. And in the case of chronic pain, if the brain perceives that a part of your body is vulnerable, then it will protect in every way that it can. As I said, that's your brain's job. But unfortunately, this can become a problem. The neural networks in our body that produce pain become more sensitive when pain goes on for longer periods of time. They become more practiced at creating pain. And over time, it doesn't take as much of a stimulus to make something hurt or for it to hurt more. And to summarize that, basically, our brain can become overprotective the longer we've had pain, where small input leads to a big output, a lot of pain, as our nervous systems become more sensitized and more practiced at creating it. The nervous system can start to misfire pain signals, and pain becomes less and less reliable as a warning sign. Treating it can be really challenging, and while it can be overcome, this isn't something that a quick fix will resolve. And I think based on the number of people in the world that have chronic, long-standing pain, I think it's very clear that there isn't a quick fix or a magic wand that reliably works for chronic pain for all people. And many people ask me, do I believe that we can recover from chronic pain? And I do, and I have seen people recover from chronic pain. I have not necessarily seen that happen with any sort of quick fix or band-aid. So recovering from pain, especially if you've had it for many years, can be done, but it requires some really intentional learning, some very up-to-date education, and some intentional work on a daily basis with really, like I like to call them, just everyday moments. But let's dive into this a little bit more and sort of talk about the concept of pain amplification in chronic pain and how that alarm system becomes overly sensitive. So I want you to think of this alarm system as being made up, and we have multiple alarm systems within our body, by the way. Pain is not the only way our body alarms us to something, but it's the one we're talking about today. And I want you to think of this alarm system as being made up primarily of the brain, the spinal cord, nerves, and sensory receptors or danger detectors that are distributed across all of our body. And these danger detectors are distributed everywhere, all of our body tissues, and they sort of act as the eyes of the brain, whose job it is to protect us. It's our brain's job to protect us. And the danger detectors or receptors are all of our body kind of picking up information. They're the eyes of the brain to help it do its job of protecting us. The nerves in the nervous system carry danger messages from the affected area in the body to the spinal cord and then on to the brain. And the brain then decides what to do with that information, what to do with those danger messages. And the brain decides if there is pain based on a variety of information, things like memories, past experiences, emotions, mood, trust, feelings of safety, where you are, who you're with, all kinds of input from our senses. And basically, the brain deciding to create pain depends on the degree of threat to you that your brain perceives. And so the brain sends a message back down to the body, and that is our experience of pain. And pain is really a best guess scenario that the brain has created, right? Based on all of the incoming data and stored information that it has to work with. And so when people say, is pain all in my head? No, I guess, right? What does that mean? Pain is all in my head, that you made it up, that it's not real? No, of course not. But pain is something that is almost entirely constructed by the brain. So pain does not live, our bodies are where we feel it, just like our bodies are where our brain is sending messages to our body all the time. My brain is sending the message to my body to pick up my drink because I'm thirsty. So the brain is sending messages to our body, and that experience of pain, we feel it in our bodies, but it comes from our brain. And this isn't something I made up. This isn't woo, this isn't nonsense. This is actually science. And we know this, there's so many common examples of this. And that pain acts as a warning sign. It tells us not to do things like don't lift with an injured arm or don't walk on an injured foot. It's pain that tells us to do things like it motivates us to go see a doctor or maybe to stop moving and sit still and rest, right? So just to kind of repeat this concept that pain is created by the brain. It's an experience created by the brain. And it's created when the brain perceives danger to the body and we need to take action. And again, the brain's job is to analyze all that information it's getting from our senses. So, it's determining whether or not it's in our best interest to be in pain. And I think a great example of this, and, I never remember which stories or metaphors I've used or not. So you might hear me repeat them. I think about, and I hope this isn't like a trigger for anyone, but I think a great example of the brain deciding whether it's in our best interest to be in pain would be like if you got in a car accident and your kids are in the back seat and the car catches on fire, but you have an injury, right? Your brain is determining based on all of that information that's being provided whether or not it makes sense for you to experience pain at that moment. In that moment, it is not helpful for you to experience pain because you need to get out of the car, you need to get your kid out of that car, and you need to move away from the car that's on fire. And probably later or after you've reached safety, that's when your brain might say, oh, now you need to experience pain so you can take care of yourself. And the brain makes these decisions. And I have this whole book list of my favorite books about chronic pain, and the women in my group coaching program will get the entire list. I think it's like 10 or 11 or 12 books. It's at least a year's worth of reading. But one of the books on there is called Painful Yarns, and it's story after example after real life example of times in which the brain decided it is or isn't helpful for us to have pain, and how tricky that can kind of be and how interesting it is. I see a note in the comments about would this apply to fibro pain too, or any chronic pain, and absolutely. And so I think that's a really important distinction to make, that usually by the time that I see people, they've had pain for, of course, more than 6 months, often years, sometimes decades. And it's at that point that, of course, a diagnosis matters. It matters to your doctors and it matters to you. For me, the diagnosis matters a lot less because what I'm working with is this overprotective brain, this overprotective nervous system that we need to recalibrate. So whether that is, fibromyalgia, where it might have started somewhere or not started somewhere and it's just whole body pain, but someone's noticing that pain's more widespread or becoming more sensitive over time, we're working on recalibrating the nervous system. I get asked about autoimmune disorders, which of course, people will, so the way people phrase this question to me is, but I have a real pain issue, right? Real pain. And I just really hate that term because all pain is real. But when someone has an autoimmune disorder, of course, there's an exact medical thing that they're treating and there's medicine for it. And the doctors are going to do things for that. But on top of that, we can see an amplification of the chronic pain experience because over time, the nervous system is getting more and more sensitive. So do I treat autoimmune disorders? No, I'm not actually treating any medical diagnoses here. We are just simply working with this alarm system and recalibrating it because it's become too sensitive. Yeah, and I'm just sorry, I'm just stopping to kind of like see the chats. And I think, there's an example in the chat too, just how much, and this is a little bit separate, but when we're thinking about is pain all in my mind? Well, our mind and our body are not separate. So the things that we worry about, think about, the visual images that we have affect how we feel in our body. I also talk about that in a previous training. I forget what we called it. It was like stress management techniques. And I talk about that a lot there. Yeah, of course. I'm responding to the chat at the same time I'm like talking, and it probably maybe isn't flowing so well. You're welcome for answering the question. Hopefully that answer was sufficient. Okay, so just to summarize that. So the brain's analyzing everything. It's deciding if it's in your best interest to be in pain. So if you're in pain all the time, or if you're in pain in any moment, even acute pain, your brain has decided that based on the information it has, a certain tissue or area or whatever of your body is under threat, and the brain wants you to do something about it. So if you're in pain, one of the keys is finding out why your brain has made that decision. And context comes into play here, along with a number of factors, biopsychosocial factors you've heard me talk about. because we know that the pain can be turned on or turned up by anything that provides the brain with credible evidence that the body's in danger and needs protecting. And so, again, I'm just going to sort of repeat that main principle. So, if you're multitasking, come back and just hear that any credible evidence that the body is in danger and protective behavior would be helpful will increase the likelihood and intensity of pain. And any credible evidence that the body is safe will decrease the likelihood and intensity of pain. And if there's been, quote, sufficient healing time, or you're still in pain, or things that didn't hurt before do now, maybe, you're starting to describe that you have pain in even more locations. Maybe we might assume then, based on some of these reports, not all, even just one, that there's been a change in the sensitivity of the alarm system, which is your nervous system in your brain, and where it takes less of a stimulus to set that alarm off. And so I know I've given some of these examples before, but I'm going to give them again. So these are examples of sensitive alarm systems in real life. I think you've heard me talk about my husband's car before, where I drive the car and there's just this loud alert that goes off. And when I asked him about it, he said, it just means you're getting too close to a car and the car thinks you're going to hit it. And so it's alerting you so you don't get too close to that car. And I'm like, well, I wasn't anywhere near the car, just driving. I'm driving along the road and there's cars parked on the street. And that alarm in the car is set so sensitively that it alerts me more often than is helpful, right? So that's a super sensitive alarm. I remember another example. I remember driving through our old neighborhood where we lived. It was like late at night. I'm on the street, right? And these houses are set back. It's not in the country. It was a pretty suburban area. So they're like not right up at the street, but they're set back a little bit. And I was driving through this neighborhood and everyone's motion sensor lights were going off. And I kept thinking to myself, wow, these motion sensors are super sensitive. How is that helpful if they're going off anytime a person is driving by in their car? Or, what if you lock your car, you set your alarm, and the car alarm goes off when somebody's across the street walking their dog? Well, they're not going to rob your car. They're not going to break into it. They're far away. So that's not, again, a very helpful alarm. It's set a little bit too sensitively. The last example I'll give is my kids used to love, I don't know if any of you with kids know what I'm talking about, those fish sticks that are in the actual shape of fish, which sadly are the only fish sticks they will eat, and I can't find them anywhere anymore. But they would eat these fish sticks with like mustard. It was so nasty. But anyway, when I would make these fish sticks, I would just kind of put them on a pan with a little bit of oil, flip them over, whatever, till they're done. But the fire alarm in the kitchen, there's no fire. I swear there's not even any smoke, and this alarm goes off every time I make the fish sticks. And so again, this alarm is just way too sensitive, and it's not that helpful. It's actually just annoying. And that's what happens to our pain alarm system. Over time and years, it just can become super sensitive and send off these alerts, danger, 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 when we're not necessarily in danger. But that danger message is an experience of pain, and that pain feels, really acute sometimes. So I'm sharing that because when people understand that pain is an alarm system, how it works, that it becomes sensitive. The fact that it is sensitive isn't your fault. It literally happens to hundreds of thousands of people. There's an entire global issue of chronic pain right now. It's not your fault. It's just something that happens. And I share this neuroscience with you to neutralize this pain. So instead of, my pain is so bad, it hurts so bad today, there's nothing I can do about it. No matter what I do, I have pain. I can never do anything. I can't even mow the lawn today. I have so much pain. Instead of that, which of course is what goes on in our head, but instead of that, we can begin to think to ourselves, something about my context right now, or in this week, or in this month, something is alerting my brain that there's threat and it's creating pain. It seems to think it needs to create pain right now. I need to sort of reset or turn down my alarm system. I need to reduce the threat. And so the main driver of pain is threat. And the main improver of pain is reducing that level of threat, recalibrating that alarm system. And so, how do we do that? Well, we start with like this 10 minutes of education I gave you about basic neuroscience of pain, because when we understand from a neuroscience perspective what pain is and truly how it works, it does kind of take some of the mystery out of it. It neutralizes it a little bit. In my group coaching program, I go into depth about this and the other foundational aspects of pain that help to take the mystery out of it. Because I believe that when we remove the mystery, when we remove the fear, when we neutralize some of that threat, it puts the person who is experiencing pain in a much different position, in a position where they have more power with less fear. They're more empowered, right? So we can recalibrate this alarm system by understanding that mind-body connection and learning strategies to communicate safety better to the brain through everyday experiences and with some very specific tools. And our daily experiences, the things we do, the movements we're engaging in, the places we go, the people we're with, all of this can communicate threat or safety to our brain, and we just need to communicate more safety messages than threat messages. And there are specific ways to engage in movement in particular that can retrain the brain's response to that activity. So if you take a minute now and think of an activity that causes pain, is there a chance that your brain, for any reason, regards this activity as threatening? Is that past experience, recent experience, memories, um, like, or even, what was I going to say? I don't know. I guess this is sort of a good example. I had our friend fell off of a ladder over the weekend. He broke his jaw and had to have it like screwed shut so it would heal. It's like crazy. But I was telling my friend, my other friend about it, and she immediately tensed up and just was so fearful. And she said, I just have this story. A family member of hers had fallen off of a ladder and actually passed away. And so I'm not saying it always has to be memories or context, but there's always something there. It could even be a recent experience that didn't go well. I went for a walk and I tried to walk 4 miles and it was horrible. And I flared up my pain for a month after that, right? So then is my brain going to experience safety with walking after that? Probably not. So there are a lot of things that can cause our brain, for some reason, to regard an activity as threatening, probably for a good reason. But if we dive deeper, we know that when the nervous system is keeping pain going, hurt doesn't necessarily or usually mean harm when we're talking about chronic pain. It doesn't mean that we are damaging ourselves. And if we can engage in activities in a certain way, we can create safety associations for the brain with these activities. So if that day, instead of walking for 4 miles straight through, I had done like 5 minutes at a time with breaks in between. And what that is looks different for everyone. But maybe if I had had a good experience with the walk, my brain would be less likely to associate it with threat. And the more times that's repeated, the more safety I'm communicating to my brain. And the way that we approach our day in general can impact our flare ups as well. If you're in a cycle of flare ups, that they happen often or frequently, or they're super intense, or they last a long time, that would be a sign, or your pain is becoming more widespread. You just feel your body becoming more sensitive. Perhaps your mood is impacted, your sleep is impacted, your memory, there's that brain fog, you're fearful of activities. Your brain and nervous system are probably operating with a high level of threat. They're highly sensitive, and by that I mean highly overprotective. And I like to call this like use of everyday kind of activities and movement. There's value centric movement. So there's a way to do the things that we enjoy doing without causing flare ups. There are pain interrupting rituals. So certain routines, rituals, or the way of designing a day that can cultivate messages of safety to the brain to reduce flare ups. And there's sort of mind body strategies as well, right? Things that we can do throughout the day to kind of keep our nervous system at a low level of threat. And I believe and have experienced and have seen this sort of proven system work for women, where we combine these three things: value centric movement, pain interrupting rituals, mind, body, wisdom, and practices. And it can make such a big difference and sort of propel them and accelerate their pain recovery. So if you're hearing this and you want to learn how to reduce the threat level so that you can return back to the things in life that bring you more joy, more vitality, more productivity with less flare-ups, let's hop on a call. You can comment ready in the comments, or you can send me a direct message on DM. I'm on there all the time, and we can begin the process of putting together a more personalized strategy for you if that's something that you're interested in. And that's all I had for today. I hope that was helpful. I hope in some way, in some small way, this initial kind of whatever 30 minutes of education helped dial down your threat level a little bit, but please be in contact if you want to strategize how to do that even more. So have a wonderful day and always be kind to yourselves. And thank you for joining me. I hope to see you all very soon.